today we have Jules. Welcome everybody to the Divorce Magazine. It's an online magazine that deals with all aspects of divorce. And all the contributors that we have on the Divorce Magazine, such as Jules, are all professionals. So we don't have bloggers and people who just kind of know a little bit of something about something. We have professionals who contribute to the Divorce Magazine all the time, except where somebody is writing an article about their own experience of divorce. So today we have Jules Anderson. I used to be a client of Jules Anderson a few years ago, and I still remember some of the things that you said to me in terms of nutrition and health. So I'll tell you a little bit about Jules. Jules has a degree, a first-class degree in chemistry, a diploma in anatomy and physiology. She's a trained integrative nutritionist and functional medicine and is a certified metabolic balance practitioner. Jules specializes in midlife health and has a particular passion for enhancing energy, longevity, and health span, enabling people to live better for longer. Her approach is a combination of cutting-edge science and technologies. As you can see from her qualifications, they just all fall into place, as well as natural approaches and behavioral psychology to create vibrant health and that actually lasts. And yeah, I just started off by saying that I still remember, and this was maybe in 2014 or something like that, where I was your client, and I still remember stuff that you said to me. So that actually lasts. Yes, it does last. Jules founded Feel Glorious in 2011 and works internationally with individuals and businesses such as Schroders, Rathbones, Amazon, Shell Foundation, Uncommon, Green King, TELUS Communication, and WeWork. And those are just some of them. I know there are others, Jules, that we haven't put on there. She has been featured in health publications, including Natural Health, Health and Wellbeing, and Time and Leisure magazines. She's the creator of Thrive, which is a comprehensive health program revitalizing the health of exhausted professionals. You know who you are. We know. I know who I am in that way, exhausted professionals, to ease pain, reduce stress, renew energy, and transform performance and well-being. So welcome, Jules. So good to have you. And thanks so much for being one of our interviewees on the Divorce Magazine.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. It's so good to be speaking with you.
Is there anything I've missed out on to mention, Jules, from your biography, or it's all?
I think that's all the main elements. There's obviously lots more, but that's the me in a nutshell.
Okay. And then in the end, we'll give you a website, and so people know where to find you. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So Jules, here we are, Divorce Magazine, and we're talking about nutrition and well-being when you're going through divorce. And I just wanted your take on this. What would you say to somebody who's going through divorce? Because sometimes we reach out for the easiest, coping skills or strategies. But what would you ask somebody or people who are going through divorce to keep in mind in terms of nurturing and well-being?
Well, one of the main issues I find is because divorce can be such a long, drawn out process and it can be really stressful. There's uncertainty, there's navigating sort of the legal system, which for most people is really unfamiliar. And that can be, and then you're trying to balance managing your children's health and managing your own self and juggling work and all the responsibilities you already have with this additional stressful process. Prioritizing your health and managing those stress levels, being aware of the toll that it's taking on you, because so many of my clients are going through some kind of turbulent upheaval in their private life, and it's had knock-on effects on their health. And often I'm seeing people at the tail end of that. So the one thing I'd always encourage people to look at is actually really prioritizing your health as you're going through it, to help you manage it better, to help you make better decisions along the way. Because sometimes it's very common to reach for sugar and comfort foods and bottles of wine and things that might a little bit of short-term relief, but what often happens is people end up relying on them too much, and when the process has gone on for a long time, they become a coping mechanism that's actually not really helping and often just exacerbating the problem, because they have knock-on effects on your mental health, on the quality of your sleep, and actually exacerbating the stress that you're already feeling. So whilst I would never say to someone, go full on a, embark on some new rigid restrictive regime in terms of health, nurturing your health in a more gentle way through the whole process will mean that you don't end up like some of my clients falling off the waterfall at the end, rather than actually, if you address it sooner, when you emerge from divorce, you're emerging with some strength and some resilience still intact.
Yeah. So if I what would you, because you're talking about nurturing, and being aware of how, how to cope with the whole process. And I'm just wondering, how do I know if I need to change the way that I'm managing? What would my body tell me? Is it that I wouldn't be sleeping well? Would I be shouting at the children? Would I just be exhausted, brain fog? Are those the kind of signs that, something needs to change when you're going through a divorce or separation?
Yeah, those are all really typical, even even without the going through an official divorce process. Even if you're just having problems with your primary relationship,
Yeah.
it can cause those, the impact of those extra emotional stresses. People will often find they're not sleeping. We often find that we are more irritable, more snappy, more. This is to do with our our stress hormones interact with other hormones in our body. So the stress hormones interact with our metabolic hormones. So like our sort of insulin release, it affects our sugar levels, and that can make you more crabby and more, and your energy erratic. It affects the sort of neurotransmitters going on in your brain. So it'll affect how fulfilled and all those kind of endorphin levels get depleted, because you're burning up with too many stress hormones. So it tips the balance of all of those in your body. So typically it's mood, sleep, cravings are really common, and you do seek and crave out sweet foods, and people seek those out. And people say, oh, how much is too much, and how do I know? Well, if you actually just sit back, most people can judge themselves when a small glass of wine at the end of the day, or a little piece of chocolate as a treat, is just that, just to take the edge off what can be a really stressful time. Most people, if they really thought about it and were honest with themselves, would know when it's tipping into, I'm just relying on that now. It's like, I need chocolate, I need a drink, rather than I'm just going to have that just as a nice, a nice little extra treat. I'm going to let myself have that.
Yeah. Okay.
And
and because one of the things that we've talked a lot about here already is the stress. And I was actually just talking about stress with my daughters the other day, and saying that stress is actually a thing. It's not just, what we're so used to saying, I'm stressed, I'm stressed, I'm stressed. But stress in itself can actually be a thing that can be so detrimental to your health, right? And I was wondering if we can just touch on, the body's response to stress. What happens to the body when we're going through stress? I just want people to know that it is actually a thing. It's not just a word.
Yeah, we have it. We use it so much these days, as if it is this kind of free-flowing concept.
Yeah.
People are always, I'm so stressed. But what happens is it's an evolutionary biological response and a survival mechanism. So as we evolved, and it's designed in our bodies as a response to keep us safe. So if you think back in thousands of years ago, we were having to escape from predators. So a tiger would appear, a tiger's going to eat us. Our body stimulates a response that gets us super alert and primes our muscles. So all the body's attention is going into the systems in the body that are going to make us run like the clappers and get away from the tiger. And that's meant to be a really short-term response. What it also does in turning on those body systems for the alertness, for the muscle strength, it's turning off every other system in the body that it deems unnecessary. So things like digestion, things like reproduction, because the last thing, if you're running away from a tiger, the last thing you're going to do is stop to have a bagel. You know, your body doesn't need to be digesting food.
Yeah.
It's why a lot of people who are highly stressed have problems conceiving,
Right.
because the body doesn't deem reproduction necessary when it's in survival mode. So it will turn off and restrict all those processes that lead to healthy reproduction. It's the same with sleep. The last thing your body needs is to be feeling sleepy when it needs to escape a predator. You need to be super alert. So the body can go into, in short term, it's really valuable. But in long term, most of us now aren't suffering from short term survival threatening stresses, but we are suffering from a drip feed of chronic small stressors, whether it's I'm late for a meeting and my child won't put his shoes on, or you know, someone's cut me up when I'm trying to get out of my driveway, or all those small everyday stresses, like I'm working to a deadline or I'm late for something. They will have the same response in the body, because the body isn't differentiating between the type of stress. But what we're getting is a drip feed of stress hormones into our system. And what we're designed to do is have a huge, a sort of massive influx of stress hormones, and then a very quick release of them, and then we can relax afterwards. And what happens when we've got long-term drip feed of stress hormones? It's affecting, we've got complete hormone imbalance, but then also our body gets locked in this hypervigilant mode, which makes us anxious. It stops us sleeping, because stress hormones don't want us to sleep. So if you've got too many stress hormones in your body, it's why we're wide awake in the middle of the night, because it's a hormonal imbalance in our body due to stress.
Do you then just feel like, because as you're speaking, even when you're talking about the drip, you know, of stress, I'm feeling it. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, yeah, that can be just, there's no moment of rest. And maybe that's when people start becoming snappy with their children, or during divorce processes, if as soon as you see a text message from your ex spouse, you're already like, and maybe they're just sending a message saying, stuck in traffic, running late, will be there in 10. And immediately you see that you're already like, oh my God, he's always late, she's always late, you know, and you're already just, you know, worked up even before anything has happened, because you have this stress just running through your body. If we think about
trigger, it's because we're super sensitive, as the way we would be if we've got up a tree, but we know the tiger's still there,
and it can climb.
Relax, and the least sound,
Yeah.
even just leaf snapping, is going to make your whole body jolt.
Yeah.
And that's
so what would you suggest? What would you suggest in terms of, because I know even working with some of the clients that I work with, where they're very, very, I would say, stuck in this stress situation where you don't understand what he's doing, you don't understand what she's doing, you know, even shifting from there, what would you suggest, either nutritionally, well-being, that a person in that state where they're really stuck in an acrimonious divorce does for themselves?
You know, one of the most healthy things that someone can do, and the most almost instant, you can almost instantly access a different part of your nervous system, is, and it's, the technical term is kind of somatic exercises or somatic awareness, which basically means your body rather than your mind. And it's really interesting, because even as we're talking, you were actually doing this. And this is what I see in so many clients. We're a very cerebral culture these days. And when you're in the process of something like a divorce, we're used to having to think our way through the process, because we're so overwhelmed with new information, new situations, and there's so much going on in our heads. We add in this hypervigilance, and there's so much energy going on up here that we get stuck, and it's very difficult to think your way out of it.
Yeah.
And actually, if you can access your body, our bodies have so much wisdom. Again, this is evolutionary biochemistry, not anything fluffy or woo-woo or esoteric. But when we can access our body in a more visceral way, then it can take the energy out of our heads and back into our bodies. So anything from, there's so many different breathing techniques you can do to get your breath, because we end up holding our breath. And that again is stopping a lot of processes in our body from going on. So just being aware of your breath and trying to kind of breathe into something. Techniques like yoga, anything that, or dancing, or walking outside in nature, the simple things that you read about all the time, the reason they make us feel good is they get us into our bodies. You can move around. Actually, if you watch an animal who's run, or animals, say dogs have been chasing each other in the park or anything like that, and they've expended a lot of energy, a dog will shake, or an animal will shake after a stressful situation. If you watch a nature program, and the deer have been running away from the cheetah or whoever's chasing them, afterwards quite often these animals will shake themselves out, and that gets rid of a lot of the stress, dissipates a lot of the stress hormones and the tension in the body.
So movement.
So any kind of movement to dissipate the tension, which is why hot baths and showers can really help, because we're into our bodies, and swimming, things like that can really help. Singing, things like singing really helps, because
I hear that actually from the vibration of the, yes.
And this is to do with we've got something called the vagus nerve, which is the nervous system that runs from we talk about our gut brain, we have gut feelings, and we can get butterflies, we can get nervous tummy, and we've got this communication that goes on between our guts and our brains, connected by something called the vagus nerve. And things like singing really activate the vagus nerve. And what that does is it pulls us out of that fight or flight, which is all the release of hormones and chemicals that help us run away from tigers, back into what's sort of it's called the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest, the peaceful, the deer are all just grazing and having a great time, and not, with not a care in the world. And we need to be in that rest and digest mode for something like 90–95% of our day. And we only need to be in that stress mode for about 5%. And short bursts. So anything that kind of gets you
movement, just moving. I remember when I was going through my divorce, and I didn't even realize this, but I used to love to dance in the kitchen on my own. Like, no one is watching. It was just like, dance, put on my music and just dance. So I see why that can, why I was doing it then. So singing, also just using your voice, also. What else I love those, and showers, and just something physiological that
things that help get you anything that gets you out of your head. So for some people, just going for a long walk, or going to the garden, or playing an instrument, or there's certain things that people just, some people love going to old secondhand bookshops and just rootling around. Anything that gets you into a sort of, either that kind of what they call like a flow state, where you lose track of time, but particularly where you're using your body. People will go for a run. I would never say to someone, start running, or start going to the gym, or start doing an exercise regime. It's like, find the thing that you love, because the other thing about doing something that you love is it stimulates another something called nitric oxide in the body, which is very good for your sort of circulation. It's like a bit of a high. It makes you feel good. It's a sort of real feel good type molecule, as well as it's got some amazing benefits for things like cardiovascular health.
What about food wise? What to avoid when you're going through divorce? We know sugar and alcohol in plenty. You're not saying don't have any of it, but what other foods can we avoid when we're going through divorce and separation?
Those really are the main culprits. I always think when you're in a situation like that, where you're struggling, that kind of combination of stress, sleep, and sugar, sort of 3 S's, can become a real vicious cycle. And The problem with sugar is the reason people do it is because it gives you a burst of energy, which when people are struggling through a divorce, any kind of little burst of energy to help get you through it is helpful. And that's to do with the insulin release. But it also releases some endorphins. So you get a little bit of a high when you've had something nice and sweet. But in the long term, it's completely messing up that hormone balance. It's also feeding your bad gut bacteria. And then it will lead to cravings. And it's the same with alcohol because you've got so much sugar in alcohol anyway. And it's that same cycle.
Yeah.
So I would always say, and processed foods, any type of processed food or low nutrient level, sort of junk foods, things with too many additives and artificial anything in them.
Yeah.
It's adding burden on your body. And if it's adding burden on your body system that's already overstressed, it's almost like you just sort of got your scales there and you've tipped all these extra stresses on your body. And then if you're adding food that your body doesn't recognize, it's just tipping the scales even further into the red. Because things like processed and junk foods or, highly sugared foods, things with lots of additives, your body doesn't know what to do with them. We're not evolved to know what to do with a synthetic chemical. So our liver's frantically trying to detoxify it. Our body can't process it. Often it's storing things away in fat, again, to keep our body safe. It's like, well, almost you can shove it away in fat cells because toxins get stored in fat. So a lot of people find they gain weight. So there's a lot of things that you can do to help you, whilst again, I'm not about, as soon as you tell your body to stop something completely, all your brain will ever think about is that thing. If you say to someone, don't have any alcohol at all, or don't have any sugar, that's the one thing that they just can't stop thinking about. So you've got to be able to let yourself be okay with having some. But there's things that can stop you craving, because again, we talked about stress and sleep, and they mess with your hormone balance, and hormones that signal hunger and signal satisfaction get thrown out of balance as well. So, which is why you keep craving things. And you can't just have one glass of wine and you keep craving more and more and more. It's because your hormones have got knocked out of balance. And your I'm satisfied hormone isn't working properly. But if you start, rather than thinking about taking loads of stuff out, I always think if you put more things in that help those hormones, help trigger satisfaction and trigger, actually, do you know what? I don't feel hungry anymore. It's going to reduce your need to eat in the first place.
I like that idea of instead of thinking what to take out, think about what to bring in that will then rebalance your hormones and your satisfaction, I guess, hormones to tell you that you've had enough. I also like the fact that you're not saying, okay, that's it, no more sugar, because sugar comes in so many things. So I would spend my day looking, does this have sugar? And already I'm stressed that I'm going through divorce. Here comes my kid who's screaming. I don't have time to start looking and thinking, does it have sugar? Oh, no, I can't have that. It's more, slowly and whatever works for you physically, in terms of enjoying it. It sounds so nurturing when you look at it like that. It's because we are people. We're not little machines who can just switch on and off little things. But this sounds so nurturing and looked after and looking after in the best way that we can at that moment without being told, that
exactly. I always think the most successful approach in any kind of health approach is one that you can maintain, because you're absolutely right. We're not creatures in a lab experiment, devoid of everything that's going on around us. We're real people with messy lives, often with lots of stresses and lots of things we have to juggle. And then we're all different. We have individual circumstances, environments. We all have individual tolerances, and sugar and toxins and all of these things. And we have to be mindful of what suits us when everything in life is going really well is different to what's going to suit us when we're going through quite a turbulent time emotionally, and practically and logistically. It's not just an emotional issue, divorce. You've got lots of extra responsibilities to deal with. There's lots of anxiety over finances. There's lots of practical issues around, gosh, so now I'm going to have to leave work at 5 to pick up the kids because my partner's not there. And all of those things are taken a massive toll. And you have to take an individual approach. Yeah. And do it in a way that brings all of those elements into play, because it's not as simple as, you know, nutritionally, this is the ideal things that we should be eating. Yeah, but we're not one type of person in one type of circumstance or just in a lab. If you do small things on a daily basis, it's going to have far more effect than trying to do big things in the short term, because then, you know, you can't sustain them.
If I mean, I need to say this because one of the things that has stuck with me since when we started working together, you know, out of everything else, was remember how much I used to eat biscuits, and I didn't realize just how many biscuits I was eating in the day until we did the whole food check. And nowadays I can just go for ages without even thinking about a biscuit. I can think to myself, oh yeah, I'm going to get myself some custard creams, and I have a couple, and then I'm like, well, that's enough. You know, you didn't turn around and say, that's it, Soila, no biscuits. And look, it lasted, and it's worked, and it's helped, and amongst other things. But what I wanted to ask you, Jules, so, you know, you mentioned about your Thrive program. Is that also for people going through divorce? Can it be for people going through divorce and separation? Is it for, and I ask this question knowing kind of like what the answer is it for both male, female, them, any gender, sexuality, you know? Because talking about, okay, let's imagine that I've come to you, to, you know, just for clarity, I've come to you, I'm going through a divorce, we're going to court next week, I have got 2, you know, children at home, and I'm really stressing, I'm beginning to see my skin is changing, I'm putting on weight, and I need help. Where would you start with me?
Well, with the program I've got, and yes, in answer to your excuse me, in answer to your first question, it is for anybody. I do tend to work more with people in midlife, in sort of 40s and 50s, because they tend to be coming to me more with a list of issues rather than just I've got a particular problem sorting out. But often it's because they're in the midst of some turbulent situation, either at work or in relationship, is feeding into that. So it's something that would work regardless. And actually, I'm actually even looking at having more specific elements of the program for people going through divorce, because I've had such a lot of interest from law firms in putting some provision together for their clients. But even with the individual one, what we do is for all the clients, I mean, with anyone, I'll take a full comprehensive health history assessment, and there's a questionnaire. So we have an initial session that's 90 minutes. So to understand every part of your health and your life and your situation, because any stressful situations are going to be a huge component of how we approach getting at the other side. But then we'll address throughout the program, we'll address the key, what I sort of call them the key pillars of health, which is, and we've talked about stress and sleep, we've talked about gut health, we've talked about hormones, we've talked about metabolism, and then also mindset and habits. Because for me, having those, creating small daily, and I'd almost rather call them rituals than routines or actions, daily actions, because that almost implies something you have to make yourself do. Whereas if you can create it as a ritual, something that you can enjoy doing, you can then, so you'll want to sustain it. And because we're all really busy people, the last thing we want to do, as you say, is spend our day weighing food, looking at food labels, double checking everything.
And feeling guilty.
Exactly, because guilt is another way of stimulating stress hormones. So we'll cover through, on a one-to-one basis, I would normally take people on for like a 6-month program, and then we'll look at each of those pillars individually, but we'll be focusing very much on what each individual person, the individual needs, because everyone's got slightly different priorities in terms of health. You can look at actually which which of these areas is the most important to tackle first, and
Mm.
actually, or which of them actually is quite a simple one to tackle, because if we can get some quite quick results for people, then that's always going to be beneficial, because if you're getting some quick results and you start to feel better quickly, everything goes better. You'll be able to better tackle the rest of the process. You'll be more motivated. So it works on all those levels.
Really,
but they all cover those pillars.
holistic. It's quite holistic.
It's because it needs to be to gain the long-term success, because there's millions of people out there who will and show on their website, here's this amazing transformation this person's had, here's a before and an after. What they don't show them is that same person 6 months later or a year later, when 95% of them, and the research shows this time and time again, 95% of those great success stories a year later have returned back to where they were, or actually worse. So for
And
me,
yeah,
having something people can sustain is the most important.
Sorry, Jill. I'm just thinking what because what I'm hearing from your program, it's not just the do's and the rituals, but it's also for the person to understand what actually happens to them at that moment, and to link my nutrition, my well-being to my whole self. It's not just meat is bad for you, eggs are brilliant, bananas and mangoes and all that. It's actually, yeah, but why? What
Yes,
about them makes it important for me to have it now and to not have too much of this? So I think connecting the two, understanding and doing, can help in the long-term plans that you have for your well-being pre, post, during divorce.
it's really important to know, because it's one thing to say things like meat is bad, bananas are good, but it varies a lot from person to person. And if somebody is not a meat eater or is lactose intolerant, or there's lots of small factors and nuances. The most important thing, as you mentioned, is if you can understand your own body, your own preferences and your own responses. And I know when we worked together, we did a lot in terms of writing stuff down and doing food diaries and doing little kind of various sort of experiments on to help you experience how your body reacts.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing reading something in a book or a magazine or seeing it on TV and understanding it intellectually, but when you experience it and you write it down, that understanding in itself really helps people in terms of motivation, in terms of what action they take. And since we worked together, because that must be, like you say, more than 10 years ago, probably, I've introduced more, because there's a lot of really great technology available now. So I've introduced some of that into the programs that I work with, so that we can measure, say, your blood response to glucose, and things like there's something called heart rate variability, which measures your individual response to stress, and shows the impact that your day-to-day actions not only have on your stress and recovery. So again, looking at, you're almost seeing it on a chart of those bursts of energy versus recovery, like we're supposed to do. And a lot of people are just showing that it's all red bars, so constant stress and no recovery. And you can see really clearly the impact it has on your sleep quality. So even just, I find that people seeing something on a chart helps reinforce. And then if you log it to what you do in a day, you can very quickly start to see that, you know what, a small glass of wine, if I have it by 7 o'clock, doesn't really impact my sleep much. But if I have a couple of glasses, or I have them later in the evening, gosh, it makes a big difference. If I work late, I'm up on my computer and screens working late, does that have an impact on my sleep? Or what happens if I take a break at lunchtime, or compared to when I power through because I've got a deadline? And when you can see it in a chart, writing it down, obviously, as you know from working together, makes a difference.
It does.
Those days when you say, no, I didn't have any biscuits on yesterday. Well, actually, I'm looking at your diary here, Soila. It says you had 4.
In the morning.
can forget, yes. But writing down is really beneficial. But the additional benefit you can get from using a bit of technology, often really, I will only ever use those if they stimulate action in people. They
Right.
help understanding and they inspire action. Because other than that, I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with devices, because a lot of people, they will, particularly when it comes to sleep,
Yeah.
steps can be motivating, but a lot of the other metrics on there, and I find particularly with sleep, I've had several clients say to me, you know, I can look at my sleep, I look at my sleep on my device or on my phone, and I woke up and I felt fine, and then I looked and my Apple Watch told me I'd had really rubbish sleep last night, so then I felt bad. And you're actually letting a device tell you how you should feel, and that is not something
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I think it can be used much more intelligently to help you understand your body and take specific action.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I really like the individual stance that you're taking with your clients. It's not an umbrella, that everybody should cut down on meat, everyone should have more chicken. It's not that. It's actually looking at me and how I work, how I operate, what Soila has, doesn't have, what works, what doesn't work, and not, putting the same thing onto Penny, who's doing something different, and you think that we should be doing the same thing. So I really like that whole idea, and I know that it works because it lasted with me. So yeah, so I know your work. Jules, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on today and speaking to us on the Divorce Magazine. Really,
Yeah.
really helpful. I've come to learn how important nutrition is while you're going through divorce and separation or any other life stresses. If anybody wanted to get in touch with you, how could they go about doing that?
The best place to get in touch initially is just to go to my website, which is feelglorious.com. There's lots of information on there. There's also, I've got a free quiz that you can do. It just takes a couple of minutes, and actually it can help pinpoint within those 6 pillars where you could focus the most attention. I'm all about sort of the 80-20 rule. If 20% of your actions can give you 80% of the result, then focus on the areas that can get you the biggest result. So that quiz can really help.
Okay.
And then all my contact details are on there. You can find me on socials as Glorious Jules. And again, there's lots of resources. I do frequent talks and free webinars, and there's information about my programs on there as well. I do have a group program that I launch a couple of times a year as well, which still covers those pillars and allows for some personalization within there. So it's, whilst it's a group one, you're still able to personalize it.
Yeah. How many people maximum in a group?
I tend to keep it around 20 maximum.
Yeah. Okay.
Again, it's nice for people to have some feel that they're getting certain attention. So we do Q&As, we do online sessions, so you can get your individual questions asked as well.
Okay. Jules, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure having you. There's so much. I had questions, but then I thought to myself, you can't be doing all of that right now. You're going to have to ask another time. So thank you so much. And thanks for coming on the Divorce Magazine.
Oh, always a pleasure.
Thank you.